Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. They're a lifeline for many northern communities, barges and sea lifts. They bring much-needed supplies to places without year-round road access. But this year, in the Northwest Territories, barges won't be traveling up the Mackenzie River to Norman Wells and Tulita. They have all been cancelled. Robert Holden has more.
The government of the NWT says the barges are cancelled due to historically low water levels on the Mackenzie River. CBC News brought you a story yesterday on how those low levels are affecting communities in the South Slave and Deschaux. Visible rocks and sandbars can be seen throughout the Mackenzie River at certain points. Deputy Mayor of Norman Wells, Pascal Audette, says he's disappointed, but not surprised.
Yeah, it's going to have repercussions. Any kind of significant building project or construction project will be postponed. We have Imperial Oil here in town that runs a large operation, and they need to be resupplied. So the list just goes on and on and on.
With the cancellation, the Territory's Fuel Services Division will deliver fuel to Toledo once the winter road opens next year. The division says the town should have enough until then. The GNWT also says it has notified Imperial Oil in Norman Wells and that the company will be notifying customers to develop alternative supply plans. As for cargo, Marine Transportation Services says it will contact affected customers directly. Robert Holden, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Residents in Nunavut's smallest community are fed up with a lack of access to clean water. Alpaluk has access to a clean water source for only half the year. When its water storage tank is close to empty, the community resorts to getting water from a not-so-clean source. As the CBC's Samuel Watt reports, that happened earlier than normal this year.
I don't know, you can't really tell in the video, but it's like a yellow, like pea-ish color.
And that, Rebecca Wynne says, is putting it kindly. Right now, Alpaluk draws water from a nearby lake and river that commonly test positive for harmful bacteria. So a bit of chlorine is added, which is an irritant for Wynne.
Every time I take a shower, I have to take a Reactin beforehand because my skin gets really, really red.
There is another river with clean water Alpaluk sources from, reserved for drinking and washing if there's enough of it. But there's only a short window before the pipe to that river freezes over in November, so Alpaluk has to pump as much as they can into a water tower, hoping it'll tie them over the winter. But Alpaluk Mayor David Angantingawak says this year that water only lasted until the second week of March, so
we have to open the road down to the lake.
Meaning it's back to washing in, quote, yellow pea-ish water.
We can smell the fish in that drinking water. We even get the small fish in our water tanks.
And Tingawak says he spent years asking for a second holding tank, but for now he's ordered 200 5-gallon bottles of water to provide the communities with safe drinking water. Samuel Watt, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Devin Larrabee was sentenced to life in prison today for murdering Brianna Meniko, an innocent woman who happened to be sitting beside him. Although he received a life sentence, he'll be eligible for parole in 6 years. Luke Carroll has been covering the trial. He joins me now live from the Yellowknife Courthouse. Luke, before we start, we should warn our viewers that the story contains graphic details that came to light in the evidence. So with all that evidence, after having admitted to murder, why will Larrabee be eligible for parole in such a short time?
Yeah, Megan, so it really comes down to an agreement between the Crown prosecutor and the defense attorney. So in this case, Devin Larrabee pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Now, this carries an automatic life sentence, but part of this agreement was that he would be eligible for parole in 10 years. Now, a second-degree murder conviction can carry that parole eligibility from 10 years all the way up to 25 years, Megan. So in this case, it's obviously on the lower end there.
Why would the Crown agree to this then, Luke?
Part of it comes down to the strength of the case. So Blair McPherson, he's the Crown prosecutor. He talked about despite the evidence and the witnesses, this really wasn't a strong case. For one thing, police searched Larrabee's apartment and found the body, but they did so without a search warrant. There were also 5 witnesses there. But of those 5, only one was really able to testify. and the trauma from that event was very difficult for them, to the point they attempted suicide. So it was a very hard event, and that's not even considering the stress and the impact this would have on the family for having to sit through a trial and relive the loss of a loved one, Megan.
And did we hear from Larrabee himself?
Yes, we did. So he said he doesn't know why he did this. Larrabee said, quote, "I am truly sorry. I'm haunted by shame and guilt." And he acknowledged that he was on crack cocaine and an alcohol binge at the time. He also wasn't sleeping much then. Again, we heard about him experiencing abuse while he was in foster care. He acknowledged around the time of this binge, his own children have been taken into foster care. So the judge pointed to that as sort of a full circle situation. The judge also acknowledged the failing that the court had to the family members for taking so long to get this sentence. Meniko was murdered 4 years ago. The family had to sit through this for 4 years. The judge said that justice needs to be quick and fair, but the system could and needs to do better, Megan.
Okay, thank you, Luke. That's the CBC's Luke Carroll live from the Yellowknife Courthouse tonight. It's been a week since thousands of people in Fort McMurray, Alberta were ordered to evacuate due to an approaching wildfire. But cooler temperatures and some welcome rain over the long weekend appear to have turned the tide for now. The CBC's Jamie Malbuff visited the fire break southwest of the city. I'm at the perimeter of the fire near Fort McMurray, which started as a 34-hectare burn on May 10th, but that quickly ballooned to almost 20,000 hectares, getting within 4.5 kilometers of the highway. It caused the evacuation of 6,600 people on May 14th. People were evacuated for less than a week. Cool weather and rain gave the firefighters a chance to create fire breaks. And while this forest may have been dry a few weeks ago, it's now swampy and wet. The fire break is full of thick mud and pools of water. Good news for people living in nearby communities. The fire is being classified as being held, and right now there are 230 firefighters working on hot spots around the perimeter.
We are gritting and looking for hot spots to extinguish, and if we find them, either by sight, smell, or touch, then we'll get at our hand tools and crush them.
Ready? Walking.
Crews expect to be working here for several more weeks.
It ensures that we can just walk away from the burn scar on the landscape and not worry about the fire finding its way from the more interior, the black as we call it, to the perimeter and escaping down the road.
Because this wildfire is so close to a community, we're going to stay until it's fully extinguished, and that's slow and careful work. So it will take weeks, if not months, before this fire is considered out. So we're not there yet, but we're getting close.
The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Jamie Malbuff, CBC News, Fort McMurray. There's a push to get a celebrated NWT bush pilot inducted into the Canadian Aviation Hall of Fame. Merlin Carter's family says he played an important role opening up Canada's north, and if anyone deserves to get in, he does. Carl Ulrich has his story.
That was my dad's very first airplane ride in 1945.
Hay River pilot Merlin Carter was a respected pioneer in the NWT aviation industry. He founded Carter Air in 1962 with his wife, Jean. As a bush pilot, he developed several sports fishing camps that are still used today and helped dozens of aspiring pilots start their careers. Carter died tragically in 2005 from a black bear attack at age 71. And in 2011, Hay Rivers Airport was named after him. When he's nominated this month, his flying career and his contributions to community will be considered. Carter's oldest son is a pilot.
I remember the willingness more than anything to help people, to give of himself, to help people, even if it was an imposition to him. He didn't consider it an imposition or an inconvenience because of the quality of goodness that he had. And that was a beautiful quality that I'll always remember.
This isn't the first time Carter's friends and family tried to get him into the hall. The first attempt was in 2019. He didn't get in, but did make the shortlist. Carter's younger son, Miles, is also a pilot and still runs his father's fish camp at Nanacho Lake. He first learned to fly with his dad.
And one thing that always stuck with me and that saved me and other people's lives over the years when flying was he always told me, Miles, you make the airplane do what you want it to do, because if you let it do what it wants to do, it might not be very good. So if you're in a situation, you make it do what you want it to do. And that's has saved me once before. It was okay, never damaged the airplane, but it was those thoughts were going through my mind at the time when I had an engine failure. So.
Only 5 people are inducted into the Aviation Hall of Fame every year. If Carter does get in, he won't be inducted until 2025. Carla Ulrich, CBC News, Hay River.
Who is Indigenous and who is not? The answer can depend on who you ask, and it can also be political and emotional. Now, Memorial University in Newfoundland is being tasked with deciding who it considers Indigenous after receiving an independent report aimed at rooting out false claims of Indigenous identity. Ariana Kelland has that story.
The report lays out the groundwork for identity policies. MUN hired First Peoples Group to do consultations with Indigenous groups and to make recommendations. But the university stresses they're just that, recommendations.
We need to determine the best course of action going forward, but we have made no decisions yet, and any decisions that we do take will be through the full process of consultations and policy protocol development.
The report recommends verifying an Indigenous collective if the feds and other Indigenous groups recognize them. The stakes are high in getting it right. Identity policy will determine who can and cannot access Indigenous scholarships and jobs. Right now, the university works on an honor system of self-declaration.
We need to come up with some kind of protocol because during all of the process, we actually have Indigenous students applying for Indigenous scholarships. We have Indigenous faculty teaching Indigenous subjects.
What's clear from this report is that there is a wide spectrum of opinion. Some feel the university shouldn't police identity at all and that it's colonialist. Others say to not verify is, well, colonialist. But the biggest elephant in the room, a lack of consensus over which collectives should be included at all.
This report is basically useless, and definitely should be shelved.
Nunatuva President Todd Russell says the process was flawed at the outset when he says the VP Indigenous told him his people wouldn't be included in an Indigenous roundtable.
And what we have seen now in this report is basically a backing up of that position that was taken by Memorial University. And so there is ample evidence, obviously, in the report of this bias.
Nunatuavut says it represents about 6,000 Inuit in central and southern Labrador. Innu Nation and the Nunatsiavut government have for years disputed those claims and the legitimacy of the NCC's Indigenous status.
It is about politically pandering.
Those issues that you refer to are not just the university's issues. In fact, you could argue they're not the university's issues.
The big question, with such politically and emotionally charged debate, how can a university get it right for everyone?
Yeah, that's a difficult situation to be in. It's not just the one group, actually. There's more than one group and on the island, actually. And that's why it's not going to be a fast process. We need to listen to both sides of that argument.
Bose would not put a timeline on when such a policy would be developed. But MUN isn't alone, of course. It follows many other Canadian institutions grappling with these same issues, many getting similar reports, some who have also had their fair share of controversy with high-profile professors' claims to Indigenous identity debunked.
Obviously watching what happens elsewhere. We're also noting that things have not been perfect elsewhere.
In the backdrop, the last MUN president, who was removed over her previous statements about her Indigenous ancestry. There's over 1,000 self-identifying Indigenous students at MUN, on top of Indigenous faculty and staff, all no doubt watching closely to see who's in and who's out. Ariana Kelland, CBC News, St. John's.
Hi, I'm Abel.
I often forget to mention that he's an amputee because Abel will try any activity he can.
My arm helps me with basically everything.
He doesn't see what he can't do, he sees what he can do.
Yeah, this is helping.
The War Amps has just given him the ability to do all the activities every kid can do.
When you donate to the War Amps, you help kids like me. Thank you!
When we see Team Canada on the world stage, we're witnessing pure greatness. What we don't see is their struggle. We don't see Maggie McNeil navigating her anxiety, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander getting cut from his high school team, or Ellie Black hearing she's just too old to compete. What we don't see makes us who we are. We're all bravely facing the odds in our lives, and our bravery is our victory.
Everyone listen up.
Bursting with labor.
All these guys 21?
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Owning an NHL team.
Penguins had us review your offer, and it looks good.
Wow. Get me on the phone with Cops Coliseum. Tell them I want to buy it.
A larger than usual startup is underway in Nova Scotia. It's a business involving a herd of bison. Paul Palmeter has the story of the family from Germany that owns the farm and their plans to grow their business.
This is the herd of bison that is now making themselves at home in the Musquodoboit Valley. 41 of them were transported to the area from Ontario in 2 trucks 2 weeks ago.
They got here really calm. It was really much better than we expected it to be, I guess. They settled in really well after a couple hours.
Physically getting these animals to the farm was actually much easier than the behind-the-scenes work. When they came from Germany, they operated a deer farm, and they had to go through a lot of paperwork to make everything happen here.
Bringing a whole herd of bison to Nova Scotia, we had to understand how everything is working and to whom we have to contact in order to get all the permits that we need.
The Tearlings packed up all their belongings and heavy machinery into shipping containers and sent them to Nova Scotia to their new property. They had to build a 1.7-kilometer road around the bison enclosure, which is a mix of pasture land and woods. But they saved a lot of money by using their own gravel pit on the site. The posts for the fencing also came from trees on the property that were knocked down by Hurricane Fiona, which was another cost saver and helped clean up the property at the same time.
We got it all done and settled, but it was long days and long hours. But it worked out.
The Tearlings are planning to market their farm as an agritourism destination. They are encouraging campers and tenters to visit the farm and are designating locations next to the enclosure so they will be guaranteed to see the animals. They've also purchased a nearby cottage and will be building new ones to encourage more visitors to come. Paul Palmeter, CBC News, Lindsay Lake.
Yukon first responders have a new special colleague, a dog with healing skills. His name is Thorin, and his role is purely for the staff. He's helping police, paramedics, and firefighters prevent and reduce their stress. Thorin is the first certified dog to work with first responders in the Yukon as an emotional support tool. He was officially introduced yesterday to Yukoners during a special ceremony. Take a look.
Thorn. He is a Pat's dog. He's 2.5 years old, and so he's came from the Lord of the Rings. So yeah, he is the Prince of the Dwarves, and let's say he very much owns up to the name. Kind of looks like a big goofball, but just this fun-loving dog, and that is very much what he is. He has this pounce like a fox when he plays with his toys, and he's tugging with the crews, but he is as well the most gentle, loving dog, and we've seen it in action of just he can understand and takes on people's stressors. So his job is going to be working preventively with first responders in the Yukon. He's been trained to help detect stress and high levels of cortisol in first responders, and then he's been trained to be able to help bring people from a heightened state down to a lower state.
I invite you to stay for dinner.
How long have you been working with EMS?
I've been in EMS for 34 years.
How have you noticed the conversation around mental health change when it comes to EMS workers?
It has changed 180 degrees. Certainly when I entered into EMS, this was not a discussion. And it's not because people didn't care. I don't think people understood. EMS responders and responders are exposed to psychological injury every day. And many, many members of our team have it. And this dog plays a role, not just in helping treat, but help prevent psychological injury and bring resilience to the team. So we're really, really excited.
Two alpacas who've suffered years of neglect have formed a special bond at a llama sanctuary in BC. After being rejected by other animals for being different, they seem to have found their happy ending. Check it out.
We have two very special alpacas they've brought tears to our eyes and joys to our hearts because they've both been lonely. They've both been without companions. Jemmy being 3, when she came to us at 3 days old, she had been rejected by her mother because of her strange head movement. She's swaying like this to be able to hear. She hears the vibration on things, so she's always listening. And she is now 7. She just had her 7th birthday. In fact, it's probably today. And she's filled our hearts with joy. She is a sanctuary superstar with the visitors, but she's never managed to have a companion who would accept her fully.
Eddie the alpaca arrived in October of last year in very poor shape. He's quite a bit older. We don't know how old, but he is completely crippled from not being able to move for so long because his coat was so heavy. He is slowly recovering, but in that recovering stage, just recently we happened to bring the two alpacas into the same paddock and they met up and formed a bond that is most unlikely, but it's precious.
Eddie was observing her. I saw him watching her. He couldn't take his eyes off her. And I think he was noticing that when the others were mean to her, that she didn't retaliate. She didn't react in the normal llama or alpaca way. And I think that interested him because he, up until then, couldn't think of mixing with anyone. But he got up, he went over, he said hello, and that was it. He started humming. She followed his hums. Because at last she had a sound to follow, and they were inseparable.
To actually find a companion for her, or for her to find a companion, should I say, is just miraculous. It's really uplifting.
Pubs and restaurants in Edmonton are getting ready for a busy night. The Oilers are just about to hit the ice for Game 1 of the NHL Playoff Western Conference Final against the Dallas Stars. Fans in Edmonton will have to watch from home or at the bar because tonight's game is in Dallas. This is the 9th time these two teams have met in the postseason. The last was back in 2003. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Northbeat will be on early tomorrow because of the Stanley Cup playoffs, so we'll see you at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Mountain, and 4:30 p.m. Yukon time. Have a good night.
When we see Maggie McNeil, she's an Olympic gold medalist gliding through the pool. What we don't see is a person who refuses to let anxiety keep her from the starting block. When we see Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, the man's unstoppable. What we don't see is a skinny kid who got cut from his high school team. We don't see Maud Sharon being forced to change weight classes after she won Olympic gold. Ellie Black hearing she's just too old to compete as she prepares for her 4th Olympic Games. Or Andre DeGrasse dealing with all the doubters, including himself. What we don't see makes these athletes who they are. What we don't see makes us all who we are. We're all bravely facing the odds in our lives, and our bravery is our victory.
Look out! Ain't nobody gonna stop me. We have a new world record.
Oh my God.
We're a team. We fight the best we can.
Thank you for choosing Plan B.
Tell me what I need to do to save my family.
Please enter your date of travel.
I can't do this anymore.
If you could go back, change things, would you do it?
One of these days, we're gonna have to grow up. But today is not that day.
I don't want us to get older either.
Son of a Critch. Watch free on CBC Gem. Q with Tom Power. Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports is life. It's clear cut. Everything's out in the open. There's nowhere to hide. I had to prove myself more than anyone else.
You must be so proud of your son. He's gonna go pro. The sky's the limit.
There's always a winner and a loser.
You cannot reach the sky in broken cleats.
Of course, I always want to be the winner. And I did reach the sky.
Norman Kwong, the first Chinese-Canadian professional football player, still holds records to this day. He retired from the sport in 1960 and later became Lieutenant Governor of Alberta.